Ambassador Claire Bennett walked through the crystal corridors of the Galactic Council Station with steady steps. Her black diplomatic uniform carried the Earth insignia on her shoulder. Behind her walked two human security guards, but they would not be allowed into the council chamber. This was how things worked in galactic politics. The council chamber was massive. 12 different alien species sat in a circle around the center where Bennett would stand. The Karathi delegates looked like giant lizards with golden scales. The Velnari appeared as living crystals that changed colors when they spoke. The Theks floated in gas-filled containers, their forms barely visible through the swirling mist. Council Prime Zethkar, a Karathi with scars across his snout, gestured for Bennett to approach the speaking platform. His voice carried the authority of someone who had ruled for 300 years. Bennett had prepared for this moment for months. Earth needed the new colonies they had discovered. Resources were running low on the home planet. The chamber fell silent as Bennett stepped onto the platform. Cameras from every major galactic news network focused on her. This meeting would be broadcast across thousands of worlds. She cleared her throat and began to speak about the human colonial claims in the Outer Rim sectors. For 20 minutes, Bennett presented Earth's case. Humans had discovered the worlds through their own exploration. They had invested resources in survey missions. They had found no signs of previous habitation. Under galactic law, these worlds belonged to humanity. The alien delegates listened without interruption, but their body language told a different story. When Bennett finished, Zethkar stood up slowly. His massive form cast a shadow over the speaking platform. He spoke in the formal language of council proceedings, but his meaning was clear. The human claims were rejected. The worlds would be redistributed to more established species who could better manage them. Bennett felt her heart rate increase, but her voice remained steady. She asked for clarification. The humans had followed all proper procedures. They had filed the correct documents. They had respected all galactic treaties. On what grounds were their claims being rejected? The answer came from Veltara, a Velnari delegate whose crystal form pulsed with blue light. Humanity was too young as a galactic species. They lacked the experience to properly develop entire star systems. It would be better if older, wiser species took responsibility for these worlds. Humans could apply for mining rights or agricultural contracts under alien supervision. The other delegates nodded in agreement. This was how they had always done things. New species started at the bottom and worked their way up over centuries. Humans had been part of galactic civilization for less than 50 years. They needed to learn patience and humility. Bennett listened to their reasoning with growing anger. These aliens spoke about humanity like they were children who needed guidance. They talked about taking human discoveries and giving them to others as if this was a favor. She thought about the families who had volunteered for dangerous colony missions, believing they were building a future for their children. When the aliens finished speaking, Bennett stepped forward. Her voice carried across the chamber without amplification. She told them that humanity did not crawl out of caves and cross the void of space to bow before those who thought age granted dominion over courage. Humans would not surrender their colonies to species who had never risked anything to find them. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Several delegates stood up and began shouting in their native languages. Zethkar slammed his clawed hand on his desk, demanding order. When the noise died down, he spoke directly to Bennett. Her response was unacceptable. The council had made its decision. Humanity would comply or face consequences. Bennett looked around the chamber at the alien faces staring down at her. Some showed anger, others disappointment. A few seemed almost sad that it had come to this. She thought about calling President Rodriguez on Earth, but she already knew what the answer would be. Humans did not abandon what they had earned through sacrifice and hard work. She told the council that Earth rejected their decision. Humans would keep their colonies and defend them if necessary. The galaxy was large enough for everyone, but it was not large enough for bullies who stole from those weaker than themselves. Zethkar's eyes narrowed to slits. He had expected the human to eventually see reason. Instead, she continued to show defiance that bordered on insult. He declared that the council session was over. Ambassador Bennett would be detained, while the council considered appropriate responses to human aggression. Security forces from multiple species entered the chamber. Bennett did not resist as they placed energy restraints on her wrists. She was escorted to a holding cell in the station's detention level, The walls were transparent, allowing her to see other prisoners from various species who had also defied council authority. 3 days passed before Zethkar visited her cell. He offered her one final chance to reconsider. If she authorized the transfer of human colonies to council control, she would be released and humanity would be forgiven for their defiance. Bennett looked at him through the transparent wall and said that humans did not trade freedom for forgiveness. The execution was scheduled for the next day. According to galactic law, representatives who refused to accept council decisions could be terminated to prevent their governments from continuing dangerous policies. The ceremony would be broadcast to show other species the consequences of defying established order. Bennett spent her last night writing messages to her family and to President Rodriguez. She told them that she was proud to represent humanity and that she hoped her death would not be in vain. She asked them to remember that some things were worth dying for, and freedom was one of them. The execution chamber was smaller than the council chamber, but it contained the same cameras and the same alien delegates. Bennett was brought in wearing a simple white robe. She was placed on a platform in the center of the room. Zethkar read the charges against her and asked if she had any final words. Bennett looked directly into the cameras that would carry her words across the galaxy. She spoke clearly and without fear. She said that humanity would remember this day. They would remember that the galaxy's so-called leaders murdered a diplomat for refusing to surrender what humans had earned. She told every human watching that they should never bow to those who demanded submission through violence. The neural disintegrator activated with a bright flash of light. Ambassador Claire Bennett died instantly, her body dissolving into component atoms. The broadcast ended and the delegates began to file out of the chamber. They believed they had taught humanity an important lesson about respecting galactic authority. On Earth, President Helen Rodriguez watched the execution with her entire cabinet. The room was silent for several minutes after the broadcast ended. Then Rodriguez stood up and walked to the window overlooking the capital city. She told her advisors to contact Admiral Morrison and Dr. Parker immediately. Humanity had just learned what the galaxy thought of them. Now the galaxy would learn what humans thought of murder. Captain Ryan Carter stood on the bridge of the Earthship Defiance, watching 3 different tactical displays. His strike force had been waiting in dark space for 6 hours, hidden behind a dead moon while alien supply convoys moved through nearby systems. The execution of Ambassador Bennett had changed everything about human military strategy. Admiral Morrison's orders had been simple, but brutal. Hit them fast, hit them hard, and make sure they remember why they should never have touched a human diplomat. Carter's force consisted of 12 destroyers and 6 heavy cruisers, all equipped with new weapons that Dr. Parker's team had been developing in secret. The first target was Council Outpost 7, a mining station in the Karathi system. Intelligence reports showed it was defended by 4 patrol ships and had a garrison of 300 alien troops. More importantly, it served as a communication hub for Council forces in 3 sectors. Destroying it would blind their enemies for days. Carter gave the attack order at exactly 0300 ship time. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, already firing their new quantum torpedoes. The weapons phased through the station's energy shields like they were not there, striking the hull and power systems with devastating effect. The Karathi patrol ships tried to respond, but they had never seen anything like quantum torpedo technology. Their shields were designed to stop conventional energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. The human torpedoes simply ignored these defenses and struck their targets directly. 3 patrol ships were destroyed in the first minute of combat. While Carter's force attacked the mining station, 2 other human strike groups hit targets in different systems. Lieutenant Commander Kate Sullivan led her squadron against a Velnari research facility, while Commander Bill Norton struck a Thex supply depot. All 3 attacks happened at the same time, making it impossible for Council forces to coordinate their response. The human ships did not just destroy their targets and leave. Carter's Marines boarded the mining station and downloaded every piece of information from their computers. They took samples of alien technology and weapons. Most importantly, they left behind a message for anyone who found the wreckage. The message was a recording of Ambassador Bennett's execution, followed by her final words about not bowing to those who demanded submission through violence. Then came a new recording from President Rodriguez, speaking directly to the camera with ice-cold fury. She told the galaxy that this was what happened to those who murdered human diplomats. More attacks would follow until justice was served. News of the attacks spread across the galaxy within hours. The Council had expected some kind of human response, but not coordinated strikes using unknown technology. Military analysts struggled to understand how human weapons had penetrated alien defenses so easily. Some suggested that humans had developed entirely new principles of physics. Council Prime Zethkar convened an emergency session to discuss the human attacks. The delegates were angry and confused. Humans were supposed to be a primitive species with limited military capabilities. Their ships were smaller than Council vessels, and their technology was considered inferior by galactic standards. The Karathi military commander Admiral Korthax demanded immediate retaliation. He proposed sending a battle fleet to Earth to demonstrate Council power. The humans needed to learn that attacking Council facilities carried severe consequences. Other delegates agreed that a show of overwhelming force would end human resistance quickly. Admiral Morrison received intelligence about the Council's plans through human spies embedded in alien governments. He smiled grimly as he read the report. The aliens were going to send their ships directly into a trap. Dr. Parker's quantum torpedo technology was just the beginning of what humanity had prepared for this war. The Karathi fleet that approached human space was impressive by galactic standards. 24 heavy battleships accompanied by 40 smaller vessels, all equipped with the most advanced weapons the Council could provide. Admiral Korthax commanded from his flagship, confident that human resistance would collapse when faced with such overwhelming power. Morrison waited until the alien fleet was deep inside the Sol system before revealing his trap. Human ships had been hiding throughout the asteroid belt, disguised as space debris and mining equipment. When they activated their engines and weapons, the Karathi found themselves surrounded by 60 human vessels armed with quantum torpedoes and other surprises. The battle lasted 4 hours, but the outcome was decided in the first few minutes. Karathi shields meant nothing against quantum torpedoes. Their heavy armor was useless against human particle beams that could cut through metal like tissue paper. Most devastating of all were the new nanoswarm missiles that Dr. Parker had developed. The nanoswarms were clouds of microscopic machines that could eat through alien hull materials and disable electronic systems. Once they attached to an enemy ship, they spread like a plague, consuming everything they touched and transmitting their findings back to human computers. The aliens had no defense against weapons they could not see or understand. Admiral Korthax watched in horror as his magnificent fleet was systematically destroyed by human forces that seemed to ignore every known law of warfare. His own flagship was boarded by human marines who moved through the corridors like they had studied Karathi ship designs for years. In fact, they had been doing exactly that since the first human spies infiltrated alien space. The battle ended with 18 Karathi ships captured intact and the rest reduced to scrap metal drifting in space. Morrison's forces suffered minimal casualties, losing only 3 destroyers to alien ramming attacks. More importantly, humanity now possessed an entire fleet of advanced alien vessels to study and improve. Dr. Parker's team swarmed over the captured Karathi ships like excited children with new toys. They found alien shield generators, faster-than-light drives, and weapon systems that could be reverse-engineered and improved with human innovation. Within days, human engineers were installing quantum torpedo launchers on Karathi battleships. The psychological impact of the battle was even more important than the military victory. The galaxy watched as humans took the Council's most powerful fleet and made it their own. Alien weapons designed for ramming attacks were converted into long-range artillery platforms. Karathi armor was replaced with human reactive plating that could repair itself. Captain Carter received new orders from Admiral Morrison, while his ship was being refitted with captured alien technology. The next phase of the war would involve deeper strikes into Council territory, using their own ships against them. The aliens who had executed Ambassador Bennett were about to learn that humans did not just fight wars, they evolved them. On Earth, President Rodriguez addressed the global population from the steps of the United Nations building. She told them that humanity had drawn first blood in a war they did not start, but intended to finish. The galaxy had underestimated human determination and human ingenuity. Those mistakes would cost them dearly in the battles to come. Dr. Lisa Parker stood in her laboratory deep beneath the Colorado mountains, watching her latest creation tear through a captured Velnari crystal ship. The nanoswarm moved like a living thing, consuming alien hull materials and converting them into more copies of itself. Within minutes, the entire vessel had been reduced to its component atoms. The war had been going on for 6 months since Ambassador Bennett's execution, and humanity was winning in ways that terrified the galaxy. Parker's research teams had unlimited funding and access to captured alien technology from dozens of different species. Every enemy ship they destroyed taught them something new about galactic warfare. Admiral Morrison watched the test from the observation deck above Parker's lab. His strategic mind was already planning how to use the improved nanoswarms in the next phase of operations. Human forces had captured 4 alien worlds and were using them as research facilities, studying everything from Karathi shield technology to Thek's atmospheric processors. The captured worlds were not treated as conquered territory in the traditional sense. Instead, they became laboratories where human scientists worked alongside alien prisoners who had agreed to cooperate in exchange for better treatment. Many of these aliens had become fascinated by human innovation and adaptability. Professor Ziktar was a Velnari crystal engineer who had spent 3 centuries perfecting energy weapon designs. After watching human researchers improve his life's work in just 2 weeks, he volunteered to help design new hybrid technologies. He told Morrison that humans approached problems in ways that no other species had ever considered. The breakthrough came when Parker's team combined human quantum physics with alien crystal technology. The result was a weapon that could phase-shift matter at the molecular level, essentially erasing targets from existence. The first test completely removed a small asteroid from spacetime, leaving behind only empty vacuum. News of the weapon reached the Galactic Council through their spy networks. Council Prime Zethkar called another emergency session, but this time the mood was different. Fear had replaced anger in the voices of the delegates. Humans were no longer just fighting back against Council authority. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of warfare. Commander Veltara of the Velnari fleet had been studying human tactical patterns for months. Her reports to the Council painted a picture of an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. Humans did not fight according to established military doctrine. They constantly changed their methods, making it impossible to predict their next move. While other species refined their tactics over thousands of years, humans seemed to reinvent warfare with every battle. They used asteroids as kinetic weapons, launching them at near-light speed toward alien installations. They turned captured space stations into massive railguns that could fire projectiles across entire star systems. Most disturbing of all were the cybernetic viruses that human computer specialists had developed. These programs could infiltrate alien AI systems and rewrite their basic programming, turning enemy computers into human assets. Entire fleets had turned on their own commanders when their navigation systems were compromised. Captain Carter led the first assault using the new phase-shift weapons. His target was a heavily fortified Karathi stronghold that controlled access to 3 major trade routes. The fortress had shields that could withstand direct hits from Nova-class explosions, but phase-shift technology simply ignored such defenses. The attack lasted less than 10 minutes. Carter's ships appeared in the fortress system without warning, fired their phase-shift cannons, and watched as sections of the massive structure simply ceased to exist. The remaining defenders surrendered immediately, having never seen anything that could make solid matter disappear. Admiral Morrison used the captured fortress as a staging area for deeper strikes into Council territory. Human forces were now operating freely in systems that had been under alien control for centuries. They moved like ghosts through space, appearing without warning to strike at military targets before vanishing again. The psychological warfare was as devastating as the physical attacks. Human forces would broadcast recordings of Bennett's execution, alongside footage of destroyed Council fleets. The message was always the same. This was the price of murdering human diplomats. Every alien who saw the broadcasts understood that humans were not interested in mercy. Dr. Parker's ultimate creation was a weapon that could destabilize the nuclear fusion process inside stars. The test was conducted in an uninhabited system, using a small red dwarf star that posed no threat to any living worlds. When the weapon fired, the star's fusion reaction began to fluctuate wildly, threatening to either collapse into a black hole or explode as a supernova. The demonstration was broadcast to every major government in the galaxy. President Rodriguez appeared on screen after the star returned to normal, explaining that humanity now possessed the ability to destroy entire solar systems. She made it clear that this weapon would only be used if the Council continued to threaten human settlements. The galaxy's response was immediate panic. Stock markets crashed as traders realized that humans could destroy any world they chose. Several minor species immediately declared neutrality in the conflict, refusing to support either side. Others began secret negotiations with human representatives, hoping to avoid becoming targets. Commander Veltara finally made direct contact with President Rodriguez through encrypted communication channels. She explained that many council members now understood the gravity of their mistake in executing Bennett. The war had escalated far beyond what anyone had anticipated, and continued fighting would destroy both sides. Rodriguez listened to Veltara's concerns but made her position clear. Humanity had tried diplomacy and been answered with murder. Now they would continue fighting until the galaxy understood that human rights were not negotiable. The Council could end the war at any time by accepting human terms for peace. Those terms were simple but non-negotiable. Full recognition of human territorial claims, reparations for Bennett's death, and the establishment of new galactic laws protecting diplomatic personnel from all species. Until those conditions were met, human forces would continue to demonstrate why executing diplomats was a mistake the galaxy could not afford to repeat. The war that had begun with a single execution had transformed into something that threatened the stability of galactic civilization itself. Humans had proven that innovation and determination could overcome thousands of years of established military superiority. The question now was whether the Council had the wisdom to end a conflict they could no longer win. As Admiral Morrison prepared for the next phase of operations, he reflected on how much had changed since Bennett's death. Humanity had entered the war as a junior species seeking respect. They were now the dominant military force in the galaxy, feared by enemies and sought out by potential allies. The transformation was complete, but the fighting was far from over. Council Prime Zethkar stared at the holographic display showing the current state of galactic military forces. Red markers indicated human-controlled systems, and there were far too many of them. What had started as a simple lesson in galactic authority had become a nightmare that consumed his every waking moment. The war had been raging for over a year since Ambassador Bennett's execution. Zethakar's advisors brought him reports of new human victories every day. Entire fleets were disappearing without sending distress signals. Colonies that had been under Council protection for centuries were now flying human flags and providing resources to Earth's war machine. The younger alien species had been the first to abandon the Council cause. The Azari, a bird-like species that had joined galactic civilization only 200 years ago, declared their support for humanity after watching human forces rescue Azari colonists from a Karathi attack. They said humans fought like they actually cared about protecting innocent lives. President Rodriguez stood in the war room beneath the White House, studying tactical displays that showed human forces operating across half the galaxy. Admiral Morrison had just finished briefing her on the latest phase of operations. Every Council homeworld was now within range of human weapons, including the Starkiller that Dr. Parker had perfected. The Starkiller had evolved since its first test. Parker's teams had learned to control the weapon with surgical precision, capable of destabilizing just the outer layers of a star to create massive solar flares without destroying the entire system. The threat was clear. Humanity could render any world uninhabitable while leaving the planet itself intact for future colonization. Captain Carter received orders for the most ambitious operation of the war. His task force would simultaneously attack the orbital defense platforms of every Council homeworld. Not to destroy the planets, but to demonstrate that humans could reach anywhere in the galaxy. The message would be unmistakable. Nowhere was safe from human retaliation. The operation required coordination across dozens of star systems and precise timing to ensure that all attacks occurred within the same hour. Human forces had grown from a single species into the coordinators of a massive rebellion that included 12 different alien races who had joined the human cause. The Cathari were aquatic beings who provided underwater assault capabilities. The Nex were silicon-based life forms who could survive in environments that would kill organic species. The Vorth were energy beings who could disable electronic systems just by passing through them. Each species contributed unique abilities to the human war. Dr. Parker had spent months working with alien scientists to create hybrid technologies that combined the best aspects of each species' capabilities. Human quantum physics merged with Cathari bioengineering to create weapons that could adapt to any target. Next, crystalline structures enhanced human computers beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The coordinated attack began at exactly 1400 Galactic Standard Time. Carter's force struck the Karathi homeworld while other human fleets hit Velnari, Thex, and 5 other council centers simultaneously. The attacks were precise and devastating, destroying military targets while carefully avoiding civilian areas. On the Karathi homeworld, defense platforms that had protected the system for 1,000 years were reduced to scrap metal in minutes. Carter's ships used phase-shift weapons to bypass shields and armor, striking directly at power cores and weapon systems. The planet's population watched in terror as their defenses simply ceased to exist. The psychological impact was exactly what Admiral Morrison had intended. Every council world now understood that humans could strike them at will. The galaxy's most protected systems had proven helpless against human technology and tactics. More importantly, the attacks had been carried out with surgical precision that spared civilian lives. After the attacks, Captain Carter broadcast a message that was received on every council world simultaneously. The recording showed Ambassador Bennett's execution, followed by footage of destroyed council fleets. Carter's voice was calm and professional as he explained that this was what happened when diplomats were murdered. The broadcast continued with images of human colonies thriving under their own rule, showing schools, hospitals, and research facilities that had been built without council oversight. Carter asked viewers to consider which system they preferred, one where younger species were protected and allowed to grow, or one where they were executed for standing up for their rights. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Protest movements erupted on council worlds as civilian populations demanded explanations for why their governments had started a war they were clearly losing. Many aliens began questioning whether the established galactic order was worth preserving if it required murdering diplomats. Commander Veltara found herself in an impossible position. Her own government was demanding that she find ways to counter human military advantages, but her analysis showed that such efforts were hopeless. Human innovation was accelerating, not slowing down. Every month brought new weapons and tactics that made previous defenses obsolete. She sent another secret message to President Rodriguez, this time with authorization from several moderate council members who were terrified of what continued fighting might bring. They were prepared to discuss terms for ending the war, but they needed guarantees that humanity would not use its newfound power to become the very tyrants they had fought against. Rodriguez considered the message carefully before responding. She told Veltara that humanity had never wanted to rule the galaxy, only to live freely within it. But the execution of Ambassador Bennett had demonstrated that peaceful coexistence was impossible as long as the current council structure remained in place. The terms for peace were becoming clear, even though formal negotiations had not yet begun. The council system that had ruled the galaxy for millennia would have to be replaced with something that protected the rights of all species, not just the oldest and most powerful ones. Humanity would accept nothing less than fundamental change. Council Prime Zethkar received reports that several member species were considering separate peace agreements with humanity. The alliance that had maintained galactic order for thousands of years was fracturing, under the pressure of a war that should have ended in human surrender. Instead, it was ending in council defeat. As Admiral Morrison planned the final phase of operations, he reflected on how completely the situation had changed. Humanity had entered the war as victims seeking justice for a murdered diplomat. They were now the dominant power in the galaxy, with former enemies begging for mercy and former neutrals seeking alliance. The war that the galaxy could not end was approaching its conclusion, but not in the way anyone had expected. Human victory was no longer a question of if, but when. The only remaining question was whether the Council would accept defeat gracefully or force humanity to demonstrate even more devastating capabilities in the final battle for galactic freedom. Council Prime Zethkar's personal ship approached Earth's orbital defenses with a white flag, transmitting on all frequencies. The massive Karathi leader who had ordered Ambassador Bennett's execution 18 months ago now came to surrender personally to the species he had underestimated. His ship was escorted by human vessels that could have destroyed it instantly. President Rodriguez waited in the Oval Office as her security team prepared for the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. Admiral Morrison stood beside her, still wearing his combat uniform as a reminder of the war they had fought. Dr. Parker had arrived that morning with reports on the technological gifts humanity would offer as part of the peace settlement. The meeting took place in the United Nations Assembly Hall, with representatives from every human colony and dozens of alien species watching via secure transmission. Zethkar entered the chamber alone, his massive form dwarfed by the weight of his failure. He had come to Earth to prevent the complete destruction of galactic civilization. Rodriguez did not rise when Zethkar approached the podium. She had learned from Ambassador Bennett's example that humans should never show deference to those who mistook courtesy for weakness. The council leader spoke first, his voice carrying none of the authority that had condemned Bennett to death. Zethkar offered full reparations for Bennett's death and the establishment of humanity as the galaxy's newest elder race. He promised territorial concessions and preferential trading agreements. Most importantly, he offered to restructure the council to include human representatives with veto power over major decisions. The offer was generous by traditional galactic standards, but Rodriguez had not fought this war for personal advantage. Her response shocked both human and alien observers. She rejected the offer of elder race status and demanded something far more revolutionary: the complete restructuring of galactic governance to protect the rights of all species. Rodriguez outlined humanity's terms for peace. No species would ever again be executed for diplomatic disagreements. Territorial disputes would be resolved through arbitration, not through intimidation by older races. Most importantly, the galaxy would be reorganized as a true federation, where every species had equal voice regardless of their age or military power. The terms went beyond what anyone had expected. Humanity was not seeking to replace the Council with human dominance, but to create a system where the mistakes that led to Bennett's death could never happen again. It was a vision of galactic governance that prioritized justice over tradition. Dr. Parker's presentation followed Rodriguez's political demands. Instead of keeping human technological advantages secret, she proposed sharing selected innovations with former enemy species. The quantum torpedo technology would become planetary, defense systems available to any world that requested protection from external threats. The nanoswarm weapons that had devastated Council fleets would be converted into medical, healing agents capable of repairing cellular damage and curing diseases that had plagued various species for centuries. The cybernetic enhancement systems would become educational tools that could help any species rapidly advance their technological capabilities. Most remarkable of all was Parker's offer to share the star manipulation technology, not as a weapon but as a tool for stellar engineering. Dying stars could be revitalized to extend the lifespans of solar systems. New stars could be ignited in dead systems to create habitable zones for expanding populations. The aliens in the assembly hall listened in amazement as Parker described technologies that could transform galactic civilization. Humanity was offering to turn the weapons of war into tools of progress, demonstrating that their goal had never been conquest, but the creation of a better galaxy for everyone. Admiral Morrison presented the military aspects of the peace settlement. Human forces would maintain their current positions until the new galactic government was established, but they would begin joint training exercises with former enemy fleets. The goal was to create integrated defense forces capable of protecting the galaxy from external threats. Captain Carter had already begun working with Commander Veltara to develop new tactical doctrines that combined human innovation with alien experience. Mixed species crews were being trained on ships that incorporated the best technologies from dozens of different civilizations. The formal peace treaty was signed 6 months later, at the site where Ambassador Bennett had been executed. The ceremony began with the unveiling of a memorial that would serve as a permanent reminder of the consequences of diplomatic murder. Bennett's final words were engraved in the languages of every galactic species. The memorial was more than just a monument to one human diplomat. It represented the transformation of a galaxy that had learned to value courage over age, innovation over tradition, and justice over convenience. Species that had been enemies were now working together to build something better than what they had inherited. President Rodriguez spoke at the dedication ceremony, addressing not just the assembled diplomats but billions of beings watching across the galaxy. She said that Ambassador Bennett's death had taught humanity that some things were worth any sacrifice to preserve, and freedom was the most important of them. The new Galactic Federation that emerged from the war was unlike anything that had existed before. Decisions were made by consensus rather than by the dominance of elder races. Disputes were resolved through negotiation rather than through threats. Most importantly, diplomatic immunity was absolute and protected by the combined military forces of all member species. Dr. Parker's technology sharing program transformed galactic civilization within a decade. Diseases that had killed millions were eliminated. Hostile environments became habitable through stellar engineering. Communication between different species improved. Through cybernetic translation, systems that could convey not just words but emotional context. Admiral Morrison found himself commanding not just human forces but integrated fleets that included ships and crews from every major species. The military organization that had been created to fight the Council had evolved into a defensive alliance capable of protecting the galaxy from any threat. Captain Carter established the first multi-species officer training academy on a world that had been a battlefield during the war. Students from dozens of different civilizations learned to work together using tactics that combined human adaptability with alien expertise. The Academy's motto was taken from Bennett's final words: courage over submission. Commander Veltara, now serving as the Federation's first military coordinator, often reflected on how completely the galaxy had changed. The war that had begun with one execution had transformed a collection of competing species into a unified civilization that was stronger than the sum of its parts. The galaxy had learned that underestimating humanity was a mistake no one could afford to make twice. But more importantly, it had learned that the human concepts of justice, innovation, and equality could create something better than the rigid hierarchies that had dominated galactic politics for millennia. As new threats emerged from beyond the galaxy's borders, the species that had once been enemies stood together as allies. They faced the future with technologies that could reshape stars, weapons that could phase through any defense, and most importantly, the knowledge that when free people stood together, no force in the universe could defeat them.